The air inside the Kexan hive was thick, almost suffocating. The walls pulsed, veins of bioluminescent energy coursing through the alien architecture like a living organism. Jonathan's grip tightened around his plasma rifle, his breathing slow and controlled. Beside him, Wren moved like a shadow, her golden eyes scanning every corner of the pulsating corridor. They were deep inside enemy territory now. No backup, no second chances. The destabilization device was secured to Jonathan's back, its humming core faint but urgent, a reminder that every second brought them closer to success, or a violent death. Wren placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're close. The core chamber is beyond this junction." Jonathan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Then let's move." They advanced cautiously, the faint hum of the hive growing louder. The deeper they went, the more alive the walls felt, pulsing, shifting, almost reacting to their presence. The hive knew they were there. A low, chittering sound echoed through the passage ahead. Jonathan's muscles tensed. Wren pulled him back, pressing against the organic wall. Her sharp senses picked up something before he could react. Movement, close, fast. A Xan drone scuttled across the ceiling, its insectoid body clinging effortlessly to the fleshy surface above them. It paused, its elongated head twisting, its multifaceted eyes scanning. Jonathan held his breath. Wren gripped the hilt of her energy blade, its handle buzzing faintly in anticipation. One wrong move and the entire hive would know they were here. The drone hissed, then lunged downward. Wren moved first. Her blade ignited, a flash of blue energy slicing through the air. In a single lethal motion, she cut the drone clean through its midsection. The creature screeched, its body convulsing before it collapsed to the floor with a wet thud. Jonathan exhaled, adrenaline surging. Well, so much for a stealth approach. Wren wiped the luminescent blood off her blade. "We don't have time for subtlety anymore. Let's go." The hive rumbled in response, as if the walls themselves were screaming. Then came the screeches, hundreds of them. Jonathan and Wren exchanged a single glance. They were out of time. They ran. The corridor ahead twisted and turned like the intestines of some massive beast. The walls shimmered, vibrating, coming alive. Jonathan gritted his teeth as he heard the swarm behind them, chittering, clicking, their razor-sharp claws scraping against the biometal floors. "Core chamber now!" Wren barked, urgency lacing her voice. Jonathan spotted the entrance up ahead, a gaping maw of an opening, pulsating like a living heart. He barreled through, his boots slamming against the damp floor, Wren right behind him. The chamber was massive. In its center, the hive core pulsed, a grotesque fusion of organic matter and machine, its veins glowing with golden energy. Thick cables of living tissue stretched from the ceiling, feeding it power. Jonathan wasted no time. He yanked the destabilization device from his back, slamming it onto the nearest surface. The machine whirred to life, its display flickering, 90 seconds until detonation. Wren's gaze snapped to the entrance. "Jonathan?" He didn't need to turn. He already felt the weight of what was coming. The swarm had arrived. Dozens of Kexan drones poured into the chamber, their bodies glistening with biomechanical armor, their glowing red eyes locking onto the two intruders. Jonathan lifted his rifle. Wren's energy blade flared to life. The Kexan charged. The first drone lunged. Jonathan fired, a burst of plasma tearing through its chest. It shrieked, its body convulsing before collapsing. But more followed. Wren became a blur. Her blade sliced through limbs, carapace, flesh. Each strike was precise, deadly. She moved with inhuman speed, her combat style an elegant, deadly dance. Jonathan fought like a soldier, controlled bursts, every shot counted. He ducked as a drone leaped at him, his rifle's muzzle flashing as he tore through its face at point-blank range. 50 seconds. A Kexan warrior, twice the size of the drones, entered the chamber. Its four muscular arms wielded bladed appendages, its mandibles dripping venom. Jonathan's stomach dropped. "This one's yours!" he shouted, falling back as the warrior charged straight for Ren. She met it head-on. Their blades clashed, sending out a shower of electric sparks. The warrior swung viciously. Ren barely dodged, its bladed arm slicing a deep gash into the wall. Jonathan had no time to watch. More drones were flooding in. He turned, gritting his teeth as he fought his way toward the device. 30 seconds. A drone tackled him. They slammed against the floor. Jonathan groaned, his rifle slipping from his grasp. The drone lunged for his throat. He barely managed to wedge his forearm between its gaping jaws. Its fangs were millimeters from his skin. Then, a blur of silver and gold. Ren's blade flashed, and the drone's head rolled off its shoulders. Jonathan gasped for breath. Ren pulled him up. "You good?" He grabbed his rifle, nodding. "I've been better." 10 seconds. They sprinted. The swarm closed in from all sides. The hive screamed. Ren grabbed Jonathan's wrist. "Jump!" They dove out of the chamber as the core detonated. The explosion erupted behind them, a shockwave of white-hot energy tearing through the chamber. The walls collapsed. Xan drones were ripped apart, their bodies disintegrating in the blast. Jonathan and Ren hit the ground hard, rolling through the passageway as fire and debris consumed everything behind them. Alarms wailed. The hive was dying. Ren staggered to her feet, pulling Jonathan up. "The ship! Now!" They sprinted through the collapsing hive, smoke and debris choking the air. Drones still crawled from the wreckage, but they were different now. Disoriented, weaker. Jonathan's heart pounded. "It's working." They reached the exit just as the hive began to collapse in on itself. Ren hit her calm. "Command! Extraction now!" Jonathan looked back, watching as the hive, the heart of the Xan war machine, imploded, folding into itself in a swirling mass of energy. It was over. Or so they thought. Because something moved in the rubble. And it was still alive. The hive was dying. The explosion had torn through the core, sending shockwaves rippling through the tunnels, reducing everything to ash and collapsing organic metal walls in on themselves. Smoke and debris clouded the air, choking the remains of the Kixan stronghold. But something moved. Jonathan saw it first. A shadow, shifting within the wreckage. A tall, grotesque form, its body still glowing with the remnants of the hive's energy. Ren froze beside him. Her golden eyes widened. "That's—" The thing emerged. It wasn't like the other Xan. Its exoskeleton was cracked but regenerating, shifting, adjusting, adapting. Its once multifaceted eyes had condensed into two piercing slits that glowed with an unnatural intelligence. Jonathan's stomach twisted. "Oh, hell no!" The creature stood taller, its elongated limbs flexing, its bones cracking and reforming. Then, it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but inside their minds. "You think you have won." Jonathan's head throbbed as the voice slithered through his brain, his vision blurred, like his very thoughts were being twisted and rewritten. Ren stumbled back, clutching her head. Even her advanced Valouri mind wasn't immune. "You destroyed the heart, but the mind remains." Jonathan lifted his rifle on pure instinct. His hands trembled. This wasn't just another Kazan soldier. This was something else, something far worse. It took a step forward, its claws clicking against the broken floor. The air grew heavy. The hive should have been dead, but here it was, standing, evolving, and watching them with something almost human. Jonathan exhaled. "Ren!" She was already moving. Her blade flared to life, her expression grim. "We run!" Jonathan didn't argue. They bolted through the collapsing corridors, the hive still crumbling around them. Their ship was close, less than a minute away. The creature followed, fast, silent, hunting them. Jonathan risked a glance back. It was gaining. Wren pulled ahead, her lithe form darting over debris with unnatural agility. Jonathan wasn't as fast, but he forced his legs to move. The weight of his rifle, his armor, the exhaustion from battle, it all threatened to drag him down. But he couldn't slow down, not when that thing was after them. Then, a screech. The walls shook as the creature launched itself forward. Jonathan barely had time to react. It slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. The impact sent him skidding across the floor, his rifle torn from his grasp. Pain exploded through his ribs. Wren turned, her eyes blazing. "Jonathan!" But the creature was already on top of him. It loomed over him, its blade-like fingers flexing. Its voice echoed through his skull. "I see you." Jonathan gritted his teeth. "See this?" He pulled the grenade from his belt, yanking the pin with his teeth, and jammed it into the creature's chest. The explosion sent them both flying. Jonathan hit the ground hard, pain lancing through his shoulder. He rolled, coughing, ears ringing. Wren was there in an instant, grabbing him by the collar and hauling him up. The creature, or what was left of it, lay smoldering in the wreckage. Its limbs twitched, but it wasn't dead, not fully. Wren dragged him forward. "No time!" Jonathan shook off the dizziness. They ran. The ship was just ahead. The hatch had already lowered, the engines humming. A familiar voice crackled over the comms. "About time! Get in now!" Jonathan's heart leapt. It was Elias Quinn. Wren leapt onto the ramp first, turning to pull Jonathan up just as the ship lurched into motion. Elias was in the cockpit, his armor still stained with soot and blood. His hands flew over the controls. Jonathan barely had time to strap in before Elias punched the thrusters. The ship roared to life, cutting through the collapsing hive's atmosphere. Jonathan exhaled, slumping against the seat. His body ached. His mind was still reeling from that thing. He turned to Wren. She was breathing hard, her expression unreadable. "You good?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, but her golden eyes were distant. Elias glanced at them through the rear-view monitor. "Can someone explain what the hell just happened?" Wren met Jonathan's gaze. Then she said the words neither of them wanted to say. "The Kexan are changing. They had destroyed the hive core, but somehow, some way, the Kexan had adapted. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, they weren't just fighting an army. They were fighting something that could think, something that could hunt, something that wouldn't stop." Jonathan tightened his grip on his rifle. He had a bad feeling about this, and for once, he knew he was right. The cockpit was silent, except for the faint hum of the ship's systems. The adrenaline from their escape still lingered in Jonathan's veins, but the weight of what had just happened was heavier than any battle he'd ever fought. Elias adjusted the flight controls, his fingers moving with the precision of a battle-worn soldier. His eyes flicked to Jonathan and Wren through the rear monitor. "So, someone want to explain what in the hell that was?" Jonathan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know, man. But whatever it wasn't like the others." Wren's gaze was distant, her posture tense. "The Kexan have always been adaptive. But this is different." Elias frowned, his grip tightening on the controls. "What do you mean, different?" Wren hesitated for just a second before answering. "It spoke to us." Elias's expression darkened. "In what way?" Jonathan leaned forward. "Not with words, in our heads." Elias's jaw clenched. "You're telling me the Kexan have psychic abilities now?" Wren shook her head. "Not exactly. The hive mind has always been connected in ways we don't fully understand. But this wasn't just an extension of the swarm." She paused. "This was something else entirely." Jonathan ran a hand down his face. "Yeah, and whatever it is, it knows who we are. It saw us." He shivered at the memory, at the way that thing's presence had slithered through his thoughts, like it was searching for something inside him. Elias cursed under his breath. You're saying we didn't just destroy a hive? We woke something up. Ren's gaze met his. Yes. Elias sighed, leaning back into his seat. Well, that's just fantastic. Chapter 10. Shadows in the Void. The ship cut through the wreckage of the battlefield, passing shattered Veluri ships and the husks of Kaan war forms. The battle had ended hours ago, but the scars of it stretched for miles. Ren's hands hovered over the hollow table, pulling up a map of the sector. We need to get back to Veluri Command. Now, Elias arched an eyebrow. What's the rush? If this thing's still down there, it won't stay down for long, Ren interrupted. Her voice was sharp, certain. It adapted to the explosion, to us. And if the hive wasn't its real body, if it was just a conduit for something bigger, Jonathan finished the thought for her. Then it's still out there. A silence settled between them. Elias exhaled. All right. Veluri Command it is. He punched in the coordinates, and the ship shifted course, its thrusters roaring as it prepared for the jump to slip space. But just as the engines surged, the ship's warning alarm screamed to life. Jonathan jolted up. What the hell? Ren's fingers danced over the controls, scanning the ship's sensors. Her eyes narrowed. Something's here. Chapter 11. The Phantom Pursuer. The ship's sensors glitched. Readings fluctuated, blinking between empty space and something else, something just outside their perception. Elias gritted his teeth. I don't see anything on scanners, but... Then the hull shook. Jonathan grabbed onto the seat to steady himself. What was that? Elias's eyes darted to the rear monitors. Nothing. Ren's hands clenched. It's hiding. Jonathan's stomach turned. You mean cloaked? Ren shook her head. Number not cloaked. Phased. Elias shot her a look. You mean to tell me the Kexan have figured out how to shift between dimensions? Ren hesitated. Not exactly. This is something older. Jonathan's pulse spiked. You mean that thing in the hive? Ren's jaw tightened. It never left. The ship lurched again, harder this time. Alarms blared. The controls flickered. Something was forcing them out of slip space. Elias cursed. Brace for drop! Chapter 12. Forced out. The ship violently ripped out of slip space, jerking forward as stars stretched back into normal motion. Jonathan barely kept his footing as they spun uncontrollably, emergency lights flashing red. Elias fought the controls. Damn it! We're losing stability! Ren's eyes flicked to the external view. There! Jonathan turned, and his blood ran cold. A massive black structure loomed in the distance, its form wrong, shifting as if it didn't fully exist in their reality. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It was something else. Something ancient, and at its center, a familiar glow. The same eerie light that had pulsed from the hive. Jonathan's breathing grew shallow. Tell me that's not what I think it is. Ren's voice was barely a whisper. It's another core. Elias gritted his teeth. Fantastic! We just escaped one nightmare and jumped straight into another. Jonathan's hands curled into fists. It wasn't over. The Kexan hadn't just adapted. They had called for reinforcements, and something had answered. Chapter 13. No way out before they could react. The ship lurched again. A gravitational pull dragged them forward. Ren's fingers flew over the controls. We're being pulled in! Elias fought the thrusters. I can't break free. It's like we're being dragged by something alive. Jonathan's gut twisted. He turned toward the viewfinder, staring at the massive structure, at the pulsing core at its heart. It wasn't just some dead Kexan artifact. It was awake, and it was pulling them in. Jonathan turned to Ren. Tell me you have a plan. She didn't answer, because for the first time, Ren looked afraid. To be continued.